Hey mamas, welcome back to another episode of The Birth Experience with Labor Nurse Mama, aka me. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by an amazing mama to 3 babies who has such an inspiring birth journey to share with us. She is a doula, she is a fitness expert, her name is Anna, and I am super excited about this conversation. Hello, everyone. Today's guest is Anna McClellan, and she is like a jack of all trades. She's a doula. She does fitness, and I'm so excited to have her on here today because she's also in Nashville and very close to me, which we just discovered. So welcome, Anna. Say hello and tell everybody just a little bit about you.
Hello, my name is Anna McClellan, and like Trish said, I am right outside Nashville in the Spring Hill area. I have been married for 8 years. I've got 3 kiddos, and I have kind of just married my 2 loves of birth and fitness and motherhood, and that's kind of the realm that I've been working in for the last few years, which I've thoroughly enjoyed, and it's been a really big blessing. So I love working with other women and other mamas, and it brings me a lot of joy.
I love that, Anna. So you've been busy in the last 10 years since you moved to Tennessee.
Lord have mercy. I have been so busy. And I have been busy the last couple years. It just seems like the more busy my family gets, the more busy even like my own personal and my husband's lives get. It's because he also runs a business as well, and I help him with that. And so it's been pretty nuts in a good way, in a really good way.
I love that. So you guys, is he from Tennessee?
He is, yeah.
Okay,
he's from
so
a small
you moved here.
Town, Carthage, yeah.
Oh, wow. That is where, I'm pretty sure that's where, no, my daughter's boyfriend, I think, lives there.
We just have all the connections. It's fine.
We do. Oh my gosh, this is so meant to be.
I know, right?
It. So you married your husband and then boom, boom, boom. You're very much like me. You know, I have 7 kids. So I had a lot of them right back to back. So you wanted to be a doula. And I loved what you said in your little download you gave me beforehand. I was reading that you love it, but it's really, being a doula is very hard when you're raising your own little babies. And I went to nursing school to be a labor nurse, and I was going to be a midwife. That was my goal. But the same thing, I realized like you can't have a life, or you schedule everyone for inductions to have a life, which I don't believe in. So it was like, okay, never mind. But I'm such a birth geek. I love birth so much, but I love how you've combined it. So tell us about your business and what it is that you specialize in.
Well, after I went through doula training, like I said, it just was not realistic to be on call with my own littles. I was like, this is not going to work. And so I had been training, actually, personal training and training boxing classes for years. That's actually how me and my husband met, and which is super fun. But I just realized, like, I would love to take the 2 components of, going through this season of motherhood and a lot of changes happening within your own body. And I was learning that at the time. I had my daughter after I'd gone through doula training. And I was just like, I want to be able to help women who are like, what's going on with my body, these changes. I think a lot of times we want to get plugged into fitness classes or have accountability and have community, but yet there's not a lot of tailored to mamas and the specific needs that their bodies have, And so that's kind of the course that I went down. I went and got several different certifications for like pre and postnatal corrective exercise, athleticism coaching, and a few other movement certifications that weren't even really geared towards pregnancy and postpartum, but I utilized all that knowledge that I gained in those certifications and applied to the population that I work with now. And it has, and I've got to trial and everything on myself, that's been really cool to experience and go through this process myself while I'm also getting to work with women in the same exact season that I'm in. So I adore it.
I love that. And let's go back to the boxing, because I did read that and I forgot about that. So you were working in some kind of like boxing type thing? And do you bring that into your programs now?
A little bit. I will say, like, I have certain movements that are kind of, boxing styled within my stuff depending on my
Hmm.
programs. But a lot of what I trained within the boxing realm, it was a lot of breath work, a lot of breathing on cue with certain movements, and being able to like move well on your feet, which I didn't know it at the time, but highly applied and was very effective for like kind of the season of life that I was in. I did not do any birth prep for my first two babies. And so the only thing I had on my side really with them was when I make a decision about something, I follow through with it and my breath. And I worked
Yeah.
with a lot of breath work at that time. And that really, really aided me in my births with both of my first two babies because I really didn't get into the birthing realm till after I had my daughter. And learned a lot about that. So, yeah.
I love that because as soon as you said that, I'm like, so this is what I tell my students all the time. If they want to go unmedicated, you have
Mhm.
to marry that decision.
Yeah.
Like, it's like when you get married, you don't like say, oh, I'm going to try it out. We'll
Hmm.
see how that works because that ain't going to go well. And I say the same thing about unmedicated birth. If you're going to go unmedicated, you have to marry that. So I
Hmm.
love that you said that
Yeah.
because it's a mindset. It's a commitment
Yeah.
because it's
It
hard.
really is. It
So
really is.
did you have your babies unmedicated?
I had all of them unmedicated
Me
without
too.
any intervention, and I loved it. I would do it
Yeah.
all over again every single time.
Where did you deliver?
So all of them were different. All of them were in different places, in different positions, with different people. But it was cool because I had the exact outcome that I kind of wanted to have, the birth that I kind of wanted to have. And I learned
Mhm.
from each birthing experience. And so I had my son, Wade. He is about to be 6. And I was supposed to be in the birthing center with him at St. Thomas in Nashville. And
Okay.
ended up they were full, or they had something went haywire when we went in there, and it was just kind of everything was like kind of crazy. My OB went on vacation the day I went into labor, and so he wasn't going to be there. And so I ended up being in like a regular hospital room with a doctor I didn't know, with people that I didn't anticipate to be there. And I was shooing everyone away like flies, like, just leave. Don't give me your opinion because I don't like your opinion. You're trying, you know what I mean? I was like, just leave me alone.
Yeah.
I'm doing okay. I'm doing fine. I'm doing okay. And I had soul back labor with him. Like, I had soul back labor
Oof.
with Wade.
So he was in a weird position.
He was, and I learned now I was very active with him all throughout pregnancy. However, whenever I would say, I'm going to put my feet up, I did just that. I put my feet up and I would recline back. And now I know that was probably not the best, the ideal
Mhm.
position I needed to be in. And so that gave me, yeah, a lot of back labor. And I ended up birthing him on my back because like I said, I didn't do any really birth prep going in with him. I was just
Mhm.
very determined. I knew how I didn't want any intervention. I just wanted to kind of go for it, and I utilized my
Yeah.
breath. And that was really all I did. I ended up birthing him on my back, and everything went fine. I remember the doctor coming in and he was like, all right, hold your breath and push, and I just remember, like, this is going against every single grain in my intuition to hold my breath. And so I just was like tuning everyone out after that. I felt like that first push was just a waste. And after that, I was like, okay,
Mhm.
I'm going to breathe this baby out. And that's exactly what I did on the next contraction. And so if you would have asked me after him, I thought that birth went great because everything I wanted kind of happened out of it, until you go. And then I had my daughter, and I ended up having her in the birthing center at St. Thomas. My OB didn't go on vacation that day, so he was able to be
Yeah.
there. And it was just very seamless. It was still a longer labor. It was about 15 hours start to finish with both of them. It just slowly progressed. With her, I had her on my hands and knees. And that fetal ejection reflex where, you
Yeah.
don't, well, I
Yeah.
very much experienced that with her. I wish that I would have kind of held myself back a bit more instead of like, okay, let me just help and aid and push. But there was no stopping her from coming. I just remember she came out in one good long contraction, and and her birth was awesome
It's
too.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was their birth, both at St. Thomas in Nashville. And then I ended up having Waylon at home. So
And how old is she?
she just turned 4 2 days ago.
So for both of those babies, I was working at St. Thomas, but the
What?
other one. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
I was
that's so
working at
cool.
the one in Murfreesboro though.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep. That's awesome.
funny. I used to
Small
go
world.
down to I used to go down to the other St. Thomas, like if we had classes or whatever.
Uh,
Okay. And then how old is the baby?
he's 3 months. So time is
Oh,
flying.
oh my
Yes.
goodness. He's
Yeah.
tiny. I
I
love
feel like he
it.
should be tinier. I feel like that newborn, he's like worked his way out of that newbornness. And I'm like, go back. I love when they grow,
Oh,
but I'm just, it's so
oh,
fleeting. It
they,
just is,
all of a
they are going,
sudden they're
yes.
9, like
Yeah, I
mine,
know.
all
I
of a
know.
sudden. So tell me about that birth, because you said all 3 were different.
Well, Waylon, I had him at home, and it was, I mean, just from start to finish, very different with him because I had never experienced any type of false labor with my other two. It was like once
Oh, that's
contractions kind of,
really can wreck your brain.
but I will say it wasn't bad with him. It wasn't like, oh, I'm having like just terrible and just nonstop false labor. I remember waking up on my due date and I only had about 30 minutes, but they were like pretty consistent contractions. But they weren't, I knew, I've been through labor before. So I knew I wasn't in active labor by any means, but they were just more than
Yeah.
Braxton Hicks. I was like, okay, there's a difference to these. Well, I got up
Yeah.
and I moved around and then they totally faded out. So I was like, okay. And I felt a little bit during the day, but just nothing that made my ears perk up. And so then the next day or that night, I ended up having pretty much hours of a little bit of false labor, but I was able to sleep through it. I just remember it waking me up a little bit, and I was like, oh man, this is more than Braxton Hicks, but it's definitely not active labor. And so the next day I got up, I moved around, they faded out like they had, prior. And so that afternoon I was like texting my midwife and I was like, hey, I'm having a little bit of contractions, but they're not consistent and they fade out. I'm thinking, position. And she agreed, like maybe his head was just cocked in a not
Just
ideal
wonky.
position. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I agreed with that. She recommended Miles Circuit, and so I kind of got on the floor for that. I honestly, and I know some people love Miles Circuit. I'm just not a fan. I felt like it wasn't as intense as what I needed. So I ended up going in my living room and I got on my ottoman, like my couch ottoman, and did inverted breathing. So I got my hind end pretty high up in the air and did several breaths in that position just to try to create more space at the bottom of the uterus.
Hmm.
And I did several, like about 3 sets of a few breaths of that. And then I sidestepped my stairs. And then I had about a round of 30-minute contractions again. And I remember thinking, okay, this is kind of picking up. And I text my midwife. She said, well, I'm not far. Let me just come and see where you're at. And I was like, okay, I don't think this is it. But she was like, let me just come by. So she did. And I was still only like 2 centimeters dilated. I wasn't fully effaced. And so I was like, so she left at about 4:15 and I said, I'm going to do these movements again. So I inverted breathed again. And then I sidestepped on my stairs and those contractions started coming back like pretty good. So I said, I'm going to go take a bath. I'm going to see if this is actually labor, then it'll probably kick up. But if it's not, then
Hmm.
it'll kind of, get my contractions to subside a little bit. Well, I took a bath and by 6:37, they started rolling in and I started timing them at about 7 o'clock. And I texted my midwife again at 7:30. And this was only a couple hours after she left. And I said, hey, things have definitely shifted. Like I'm having some intense contractions and I'm talking, with my other two, it was like early labor lasted several hours, slow and steady. This was like, boom. Once my contractions started getting consistent, they got intense. And I remember leaning over my bed and I was like, just breathing through a contraction. And I texted my husband, I said, get up here. And my parents were actually in town. They had just come in town the night before. So they were there to help, which was great. They had my kids downstairs. And so I called my midwife and I said, hey, here's where I'm at. She listened to me breathe through a contraction. She said, hey, I'm going to head back. I'm going to head back your way. And so she ended up getting there. I went from, what was it, like 4 centimeters to 8 centimeters in about 45 minutes. We were rolling at that point. And so
I love it.
I ended up having him by 10:35 that evening. So labor, once it really started going, was only about
Yeah.
3.5 hours.
I
Um,
love it. For those of you guys listening, this is why I say dilation does not matter.
no,
Does
yeah,
not matter.
yeah, yeah, it really
Because you can
doesn't.
be nothing to everything. so
Yeah.
quick.
And I will say, I labored with Waylon so differently than I did my other two. I laid a lot on my side. With the other two, I used a peanut ball, which was great. I mean, at the time, I thought I could feel myself dilating. I thought this is working. It was just slow and steady. With Waylon, I completely changed that approach. And maybe it's just because I've learned a lot, and so I
Mhm.
had a very different mindset going in. I was not fearful at all. I was so welcoming of every single contraction that hit me. I was like, bring it on. If it was like taking more than I felt like a minute, I was like, what's happening? Where are they at? Bring them on.
Yeah.
And so I stayed standing a lot with him in labor, just leaning over my
Oh,
bed.
that's so powerful.
And I would even bring one knee up onto the bed. So I would kind of give like a bit of a pelvic tilt, and I could feel him engage and move down. And I would give like a tiny little squat with it, and I could just feel him. And I was like, that. So I just stayed in that. And if I needed a break, I would like get on the bed and lean over the peanut ball, just kind of like, kind of swaying back
To
and
rest.
forth.
Yeah.
But I was
We're
constantly giving
still
that lean
active.
forward and kind of moving through it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, you're out doing lunges or squat. I wasn't deep squatting or anything. They were
Yeah.
small, very intentional movements that,
That's what it takes.
whoo, and
And the mindset.
it's so intense, but I was
Yeah.
so ready for that. And it was really powerful because we actually lost a baby last summer. And it's strange because that process with that baby, I ended up carrying that baby for about a month before I miscarried. It was a miscarriage. And when I went through that process, it took about 13 hours from start to finish. And it was miserable. It was miserable.
Yeah.
And I remember leaning on the side of my bed, and I just remember feeling myself go through that process. It was extremely sad. And I just remember after that, I had envisioned having and laboring with another baby in that same spot, in that same position. And that's exactly what I did with Waylon. And it was such a redemptive and
I
healing
was just about to say
experience.
the same thing.
It was
Yeah.
so redemptive. It was so healing for me. I just remember like smiling in labor with him because I was like, this is what I have longed for. I have longed to be here with this healthy baby doing this exact same thing, knowing the outcome that's about to come, that we're about to
Yeah.
have versus what we experienced last year. And so it was
Yeah.
it was really healing for me as a mama and just for my family, to finally
Mm-hmm.
get to that point. And I think when we talk about mindset too, I think I can even grasp that even harder leaning into the intensity, because I know I've been in the intensity of, when you go through that intensity with something that doesn't have a good outcome, when you know
Mm-hmm.
that the outcome is about to be so beautiful, you're just like ready to take hold of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really, really awesome. Really such a
I love
blessing.
that. I'm so sorry for your loss.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate that you are talking about the pain of it, because women don't talk about how painful miscarriages can be.
Mhm.
And when I had my first miscarriage, I had been a labor nurse for a very long time, and it it feels like labor. It's really tough.
Mhm.
And
Oh
I
yeah.
agree with you. It's a completely different experience, because like there is no good outcome to
Mhm.
this. And I love that you got your redemptive birth. It's beautiful.
Thank you. We had lost our first son seven 7 years ago, and we had named him Jace. And so my baby, his name is Waylon Jace. So I feel like we have come full circle with our little family, and just being able to, I don't know, it's cool to hear my kids even say his name. They'll call him Waylon Jace all the time. And it's just sweet that we've included, I feel
Hmm.
like all of our babies in such a beautiful way.
I love that.
Yeah.
My little rainbow baby is now 9. So
Mm.
it's so beautiful.
And it
So
should
tell
be
us a
talked
little.
about more, though. I will say that. I feel like there's so much
Mhm.
stigma around it. And I think it's because women feel shame and they feel guilt and they feel like, what did I do? And I just want to put that out there, that I'm sending a lot of encouragement, because it is way it's just not talked about as much as it needs to be. And
Hmm.
I've always said it is the worst club to be in. It sucks to be in this club whenever you lose a baby. But I will say I'm glad it exists because you don't feel alone. You feel isolated going through it already. You feel a
Hmm.
lot of isolation and confusion. I mean, there's a lot of emotions that go into losing a baby, and not only just figuring it out mentally, but like it resides within our physical being, and there's a lot of guards that can come up for yourself, like personally, as a woman, with your marriage, with your own children that you have. And so I just feel like we've got to talk about that or else we go crazy.
No, I
It's
agree.
yeah. So
Yeah, I agree. And even more so because I have friends that have experienced late term loss
mm,
and fetal, and having a fetal demise is what we call it in the
mm-hmm,
industry. And they want to talk about their babies
mm-hmm,
and they want to talk about the names of their babies and their
mm-hmm,
experience. And other women, I feel a lot of times it's so hard to hear.
mm-hmm,
And then you put yourself in their place. And so, yeah, all around loss needs to be something that we're able to speak to one another about
mm-hmm.
and the experience, like so that you don't go into it unprepared
Yeah,
because it is very hard and it's emotionally devastating. So it really does. For those of you guys listening, I have two pieces of advice. Listen, but don't overtalk.
I would
You
agree with
don't
that.
have to say things. You don't have to fill the silence. You don't have to say things like, well, God has a plan,
Mm-hmm.
because that hurts in the moment and you don't want to hear those things. So err on the side of caution and just listen
And I
and
would
say,
say
I
if
love
you're
you.
going through it too, find people who have either been there, and can hold your hand in that, because it's nice to talk to people who can relate to it and who resonate with it. But also too, from someone who has experienced, pregnancy after loss and going through that. And I know I was extremely guarded while I was pregnant with Waylon,
Hmm.
but I always erred on the side of caution, of talking with women who are pregnant or about to have babies about my loss. Like I would not go there because I think that puts their headspace not in the best headspace, right? So it's like kind of being choosy on both aspects of, okay, I'm going to talk about this from my standpoint and my emotions and what I need to kind of work through with people who are in a place to be able to help me with that. But I think
Hmm.
going to people who are pregnant or who are about to have a baby may be hard for that person to get on your
Yeah.
level. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard for you. I remember when I lost the baby before Grayson, I had several friends that were pregnant at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
and to watch their bumps
Mm-hmm.
growing, and then it was hard. It was
Mm-hmm.
a really difficult season.
Yep.
But yes, we do need to support one another. But the problem there is that a lot of like I I have my mama membership, and a lot of them haven't told many people
Mm-hmm.
that they had losses.
Mm-hmm.
So it does have to become something we talk about more so that we know who has gone through
I
it.
agree. I fully
Because
agree.
I can't, when I had my own, because I had three losses, when I had the first, I couldn't believe how many of my friends had had losses and they had never told anyone.
Mm-hmm. I know.
And it was like,
I wouldn't
okay,
know how, because
now,
both
yeah.
of mine, I had already told everybody. I was 15 weeks and 13 weeks along. And so we had already told, we had already, I'm a
Hmm.
type though too, where I think it's okay if you don't wait till a certain time to tell. Like if you're pregnant, you're pregnant.
Yeah.
And I think that if whether you go through something or not, whether it's hard, I think it's important that we have that community. So if you
Hmm.
do, then they know, and they know how to love on you, and they know to check on you, and they know that they can support you versus you actually feeling isolated and being alone. I just don't think
Hmm.
any woman needs to go through that ever,
No, I
ever.
agree.
So no
Yeah,
matter, and
I
that's,
agree.
I'll say that doesn't matter if you are 6 days, 6 weeks, because once you see that line, you're already dreaming about that baby and planning for that baby. I mean, it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that it's any less than just because it was early.
Oh, yeah, that's so rotten.
I
But
think so too.
I'll tell you, my own losses changed me as a labor and delivery nurse
Mm-hmm.
because I was able to connect with my patients in a much deeper, different way after
Yeah.
having had the losses and understanding that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's one thing to say, well, any loss is a loss until you have a loss that's early And then you realize the pain of that. Because I think before you have a loss, you think, oh, well, it'd be easier if it were early, but it's not.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Well, I'm so glad that you came, and this was such a diverse conversation.
I know. We went from one over here to over here to over there.
Yeah. I love. So can you tell everyone where they can find you?
I'm mostly on Instagram. It's just at that's my website, movelikeamother.com. And then Instagram is the same handle, Move Like a Mother.
I love it. Mother, right?
With an A, yeah. And people ask me about that, and I'm like, it was just because Mother was taken, and I was the type at the time where I was like, I really want to do this. I'm just going to go for it, and that kind of sounds fun, and it's got a ring to it. So I just rolled with it. I really didn't put a lot of thought into it. I'm like, we're moving, we're rolling, let's go.
Well, and that is like a mother. That's for sure. I don't think we ever stop.
No, 100%.
Well, thank you so much for coming today. Yeah. I loved this conversation. And for those of you guys who are listening, go give Anna a follow. And I will see you guys again next Friday. Wow, what an incredible conversation with Anna. I love how each of her birth stories and her losses played into her passion for birth and preparation and fitness and faith. If there's one takeaway from today, it's that you are in control of your birth experience, and it can be beautiful no matter what. As always, thank you for listening. Hit subscribe, write a review, and I'll see you again next Friday. Bye for now.